You ever hear a story so wild, so unexpectedly out of the blue, that for a moment, you're not even sure if you believe it? You stop whatever you're doing. Your mind goes blank for a split second. And all you can think is, wait, what did I just hear? This is one of those stories. Because just when we thought Johnny Depp had stepped away from all the chaos, the flashing lights, and the headlines that never seemed to leave him alone, something happened. Something small. Quiet. The kind of thing that normally wouldn't even make it past the walls of the room where it happened. But somehow, it did. And the moment people caught wind of it, the internet lit up. Here's why. Johnny Depp was spotted. Not on a red carpet. Not on a movie set. Not even at one of those big charity galas where everyone's dressed to the nines. He was at a party. Now, I get it, at first, that might not sound like a big deal. Celebrities go to parties. That's not news, right? But this wasn't just any party. This was a gathering so private, so off the radar, that even some of the people who were invited didn't realize who else was going to be there. And that's the first thing that made this stand out. The second? He wasn't alone. Now, before I tell you who he was with, and trust me, this is the part that's got everyone talking, you have to understand where Johnny's been in the last few years. After years of constant public attention, the kind that follows you into airports, restaurants, and even your own driveway, Johnny had been doing something different. He was keeping things quiet. Traveling without big announcements. Playing music with friends. Spending time on art. Meeting fans in small, unexpected places. In other words, not the kind of life that makes headlines every day. And maybe that's why this night stood out so much. It happened in a part of the city most people don't even think about after dark. The kind of neighborhood that feels like it's got secrets tucked into every side street. The air had that stillness to it, not silent, but hushed, like the city was holding its breath. Down one narrow road, between two old brick buildings, there was a door. Heavy wood. No flashy sign. Just the faintest glow spilling out from a tiny window near the top. Inside was another world entirely. The lights were low, a warm, golden glow coming from vintage lamps scattered around the room. The walls were lined with shelves of old vinyl records, framed black and white photos, and the kind of antique mirrors that looked like they'd been there for decades. And the music, it wasn't loud. It was just there, drifting through the air like it belonged to the place. A slow jazz number that seemed to wrap itself around every conversation. This was not the kind of place you stumbled into by accident. And yet, that night, Johnny Depp walked through the door. No giant entourage clearing a path. No assistant snapping pictures or calling out names. Just Johnny. A dark scarf draped loosely around his neck. A leather jacket that looked like it had lived a life of its own. That familiar, easy walk of someone who knows exactly where he's going, even if no one else does. He didn't rush to greet anyone. He didn't pause to look around like someone sizing up the room. He just moved through it, like he'd been there before. A few minutes later, the door opened again. And that's when things got interesting. The person who stepped in after him wasn't who anyone expected. They didn't walk straight to Johnny. They paused for a moment, scanning the room, like they were taking it in. And then, without hesitation, they made their way over to him. The two of them leaned in close, talking quietly at first, then laughing. Not the kind of polite laugh you give to someone you barely know, but the kind that carries history in it. And here's the thing, people in the room noticed. Not because they were loud, but because of the way they looked at each other. Like two people who'd been through something together. They didn't hide away in a corner. They didn't sit at a private table. They stood near the bar, glasses in hand, talking like no time had passed at all. And in a place that intimate, where you could hear snippets of every conversation around you, it was impossible not to wonder what they were saying. But before anyone could get too caught up in watching them, something else happened. Johnny picked up a guitar. Now, everyone knows Johnny's a musician. That's not new. But this wasn't a performance. There was no stage. No spotlight. Just a small space near the corner of the room where the music had been playing. He sat down, rested the guitar on his knee, and started to play. It was soft at first, like he wasn't even sure anyone was listening. But then the room began to quiet down. Conversations faded. People turned their chairs slightly, leaning in without even realizing it. And the song, it wasn't a song anyone recognized right away. It felt personal. Like something he'd been carrying with him for a while. The notes hung in the air, warm and unpolished. There was no rush. No need to impress. Just music, the kind that makes you forget where you are for a minute. The mystery guest stayed close, listening. Every now and then, they'd glance at him with a smile, not the kind of smile for cameras, but the kind that says, "Yeah. I remember this." When he finished, the room didn't erupt into applause. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was quieter, more respectful. People smiled. A few nodded. And then, slowly, conversations began again. But from that point on, the night felt different. The two of them stayed side by side for the rest of the evening. Sometimes talking. Sometimes just listening to the music. And always with that easy familiarity, like whatever had brought them together that night didn't need to be explained to anyone else. And that's what made people talk. Because no one knows exactly why they were there together. Was it a reunion? A private business meeting? The start of something new? Or just two people crossing paths again after years apart? Theories started to spread. And if you know anything about the way stories travel in Johnny's world, you know that even the smallest detail can turn into something much bigger. See, in celebrity circles, who you're seen with can matter as much as what you're doing. And for someone like Johnny, who's been so deliberate about keeping a low profile, this was a choice. Whether it was personal or professional, it was intentional. And that's why people can't stop wondering. The night went on, but it never turned into some wild Hollywood party. There was no drunken chaos. No one trying to outshine anyone else. It stayed comfortable. Like a gathering of people who knew they didn't have to perform for each other. When Johnny and his guest finally left, they didn't make a scene. They didn't sneak out a back door either. They just walked out together, into the quiet night, disappearing down that narrow street like the evening had been nothing more than a simple get-together. But of course, it was more than that. At least, it feels like it was. Because the thing about moments like this, the ones that seem small and ordinary, is that they often turn out to be the start of something bigger. And if this night really was the beginning of something, we'll be hearing about it again soon. But until then, all we have is the image of Johnny in that dimly lit room, a guitar in his hands, and a familiar face beside him. And somehow, that's enough to keep the world talking.